Dear friends, dear Sangha, good morning. Today is January 8th, 2020, and this is our first Zazen Kai of New Year. So for those of you I haven't seen, I want to wish you a Happy New Year and all the best wishes for the new year. I hope you had wonderful holidays with your families. It was a quiet time here at the Zendo as usual. Usually during the holidays, it's pretty quiet here. It was very cold last night. It was, I think when I went to bed, it was going below -20. But it was a brilliant day yesterday. It was one of those very cold days with the clear blue skies. We had about half a foot of snow. It was just a wonderful winter wonderland kind of day yesterday. Today it's overcast. Seems like we may get a bit more snow. For the Dharma talk for today, I want to do one of these foundational talks. As I mentioned before, the stronger our foundations in the practice are, easier it is to do whatever we need to do, more advanced practices. And because it is the first Dharma talk of the year, I wanted to talk on the Dharma and what Dharma is and approach it from a few different angles to try to give us some sense of what the word stands for. And so I'm going to approach it from the perspective of a teacher, from a perspective of a student, how to try to approach Dharma, what is the right way of trying to listen to the Dharma, and then also some of the characteristics. Well, what are some of the characteristics of genuine, authentic Dharma, and how we can get confidence that it is genuine and authentic. And then at the end, I will also bring the Dharma and the meditation practice together, and maybe have a little bit of connection with the koan practice. But my sources for this Dharma talk today are going to be largely from the sutras, and some of it from Tibetan tradition, not so much from Zen tradition. When I think about the Dharma, it's almost like it's a kind of like this onion type thing with the different layers. When you peel a layer, there's another layer underneath, going deeper into it. And then there's another layer, and there's always another layer. In that sense, perhaps it is not unlike our koan practice, that we can always find a deeper meaning in a koan. But I will talk about that at the end. So first, to start from a perspective of the teacher, giving Dharma to audience. The Shakyamuni Buddha, he told his disciples that teaching Dharma is not easy, and it is not easy because of the number of things. And the first of the things that makes it difficult to teach Dharma is it has to be explained very precisely in terms of steps. So it has to be, the presentation has to be very clear, and it has to be taught step by step. And these steps have to be something that people can understand and they can relate and put into practice. So it has to be something very practical and very direct. And then the second point he made is it has to be explained sequentially. So it has to be explained in a way how each step relates to the previous one. So it has to be explained in the proper sequence. starting at the beginning and then giving it a proper sequence. It kind of the way it's layered, it has to be layered in a proper way for people to be able to practice it. And then the third point he made in terms of teaching Dharma is that the words which are spoken, they have to be spoken out of compassion. So whatever the motivation for speaking out has to be done out, the motivation has to be compassion, and it has to be presented to people because of the to somehow help with our suffering and with our confusion. So the primary motivation for giving Dharma has to be compassion. And then the fourth point he made was that it cannot be spoken in order to receive some material gain. So there's nothing really, when giving Dharma talks, in the mind of a teacher, there can't be any kind of selfish concern, really, at all. And that is difficult sometimes. And the fifth point he made is that whatever it is that is spoken cannot be harmful to the teacher or to the students. So it has to be something that is helpful. It cannot be disparaging of anyone, yourself or others, and it cannot be hurtful to anyone. So, and these five things then make it not easy to present Dharma, because it has to be very clear. It has to be something that people can relate to. It has to be something that relates to our life, something we can clearly understand. And also it has to be spoken out of compassion and really without any concern for your own well-being as a teacher. And then it also has to be something that is helpful, and it's always helping people, and it's not really hurtful to anyone. So that makes it tricky. Now, in terms of from the student's perspective, so this is kind of from the teacher's perspective what Dharma is and how to give it. From the student's perspective, I'll draw from Tibetan tradition, and this is something that I teach in the introduction to Zen meditation, and this is how to listen to the Dharma. What is the appropriate way of listening to the Dharma and trying to approach the teachings? And the teaching, it's a very colorful teaching, very easy to remember and to relate to. And this is, some of you may know this already, this is the three faults of a pot. This is a metaphor for how not to approach the teachings. And the first of these is the upside down pot, overturned pot, meaning whatever you're pouring into it, there's no possibility of it entering because it's upside down. You cannot really receive anything. And this is the idea here, is to be very close-minded. When we are really close-minded, we cannot hear or receive anything at all. So this is the upside down pot. And then the second one is a pot that has some dirt in it, or sometimes it's said it's a poison. So no matter what you pour in, it could be clear water, it immediately gets mixed up and it becomes something different. So if our mind is full of resentments, full of aggression, jealousy, competitiveness, what have you, it will get mixed up with the content of the Dharma, and then it will be hard for us to really appreciate what it is that's being poured in. Then finally, a pot with a hole in it, meaning whatever we receive, we immediately lose. We don't retain anything. It comes in and then it goes out immediately. So we are not really able to retain anything at all. So these three faults of a pot is a way, trying to give us very colorful way, easy way to remember how not to listen to the Dharma talks. And then in addition to that, there's another teaching which is also easy to remember. It's a kind of metaphor. And this is a 6 helpful attitudes of a student when they're about to listen to the Dharma instructions. And basically, the view here is that myself as a student of the Dharma, I should see myself as a patient and to see the Dharma as a medicine. So it is something that is directly helping me address. And if we say things like aggression, prejudice, ignorance, greed, fear, this is our disease, then the Dharma is the medicine for that. And then third attitude is that a spiritual guide should be viewed as a skillful doctor, somebody who's giving that medicine to us and who we have confidence in, that they're giving us the correct medicine. And then the fourth attitude is that the diligent practice is the actual cure. So the practice, the instructions that we receive, this is the cure, the actual cure. And then there are 2 more additional attitudes. And one is that one's teacher, one's spiritual guide is being viewed as sacred as the Tathagata himself. And the 6th one is a kind of wish, desire, something we generate in our minds for the Dharma and the teachings to remain in this world for a long time. This is very typical of a Tibetan tradition. Especially, I can say something about this idea of the teacher being viewed as a Buddha himself. This is not so much emphasized in the Zen tradition. In Tibetan tradition, one's Lama, one's teacher is principal object of devotion. In Zen, Zazen itself is our object of devotion. We put emphasis on Zazen. Teachers and still very, very important. But our principal source object of devotion is the meditation practice itself. And we are very devoted to that. And we can say we kind of worship in our temple of silence in our when we practice Zazen. But in Tibetan tradition, the teacher is the principal object of devotion, and a lot of practices go along with that. And still, in Zen tradition as well, the teacher plays absolutely essential and necessary and irreplaceable role as well. And then we can see, how if we have appreciation of the Dharma and we feel this is something that's helping us, we want to cultivate that attitude of generosity and wish for it to remain in the world for as long as possible so it can help many beings. So this is a kind of an attitude that a student should have when they're trying to approach the teachings, to have the proper attitude so that they can actually get some benefit. So this is now my presentation in terms of from the perspective of a teacher and from a perspective of a student. And now I'd like to say a few words regarding the characteristics of the teaching itself and how we can have confidence in it. It's very difficult to apply the instructions. It's very difficult to practice if we don't have confidence in what it is that we are trying to practice. So these are the 5 characteristics of the Dharma. And this is a kind of a formula. If you remember, for many, many years, centuries really, Buddhist teachings were not written down. They were recited and they were passed orally from a monk to monk. And so there were many devices put into practice in order to remember things easily. And so this is a kind of a formula for what Dharma is that was recited. And it occurs in innumerable places in Buddhist sutras. And so I will now go through those 5 characteristics. And it is said in the words of Shakyamuni Buddha, one has confidence in the Dharma thus, and then he lists this these qualities. To quote exactly, I have it written down here. He, meaning the monk, the practitioner, acquires perfect confidence in the Dharma thus. The Dharma is well proclaimed by the Blessed One. And then he goes and gives these 5 characteristics. So this is a kind of one of this, not one of the 5, but it is well proclaimed, meaning it is very clearly stated and there's no ambiguity, there's no confusion about what it is. And so the first of this is, it says it's a visible here and now. This means that it is something that is available, present right here and now. This is not something that is to come in the future. This is not something that is only available to us in the past. This is something that is present, should be present right in front of you right now. So this is the first characteristic that is very important. So visible here and now, something that you can engage with, something that you can have in front of you right now. The second one is it is immediately effective. So that means that as soon as you start practicing it, as soon as you engage with it, it has immediate effect. It is not something for tomorrow. It is not something for yesterday. It is something that as soon as you start practicing it, it immediately comes into effect. Another translation of this is that it's something that is timeless, not subject to time. Both meanings are good. I think if you think about it, this immediacy is very important. The moment you begin to practice meditation, if you're really practicing meditation, actually, the mind begins to settle down. It happens right now. It happens right there. For example, if we try to practice loving kindness, if we feel some aggression in our mind, that aggression immediately begins to dissipate. The 2 states of mind, the loving mind and the hateful mind, they simply cannot coexist in the same space. So the moment you start to apply a loving kindness meditation, or the thoughts, even just the thoughts, loving thoughts, the aggression begins to dissipate. So it's immediately, that immediate effect is very important. This is fundamental to how we practice. And then the third quality is something that invites inspection. This is very important. It's something that is inviting for you to examine. It is not something that is imposed on us. It's something that encourages us to evaluate things with our own awareness, with our own cognitive capacity. We need to use our own wisdom in a way. We have to start developing our own wisdom. So the Dharma is always inviting us to look at things. It's not something that is inviting us to have a blind belief. It is something that is inviting us to examine our lives, to examine our mental states, to examine the world around us, to examine the teachings. The Dharma itself is like an invitation. And then the fourth quality of genuine Dharma is something that has a very specific direction. So the words that you used is it's leading onward. So the idea here is that it leads us toward peace. It leads us toward awakening. So it has a very specific sort of impetus. It goes in a certain direction. When practice, it takes us in a certain direction. So this is a very fundamentally very important if what we are practicing is leading us away from peace and loving kindness and compassion. If it's just making us more aggressive, more unsettled, more needy, then we cannot say that that is genuine Dharma. So it has a very definite direction, and we should know what that direction is. Maybe we are not far enough along the path, but at least we should have a sense of direction. We should be properly oriented. We should know how to orient ourselves properly. And the fifth quality is that it's experienced directly by the wise. This is a direct quotation from the sutras, experienced directly by the wise. And this is a very important element, meaning that fundamentally Dharma is something that arises on the inside of the mind. It's said it can be known. It can be known only by yourself, for yourself. So we'll maybe say something more about that. But in Zen practice, this is really something we are aware of, because we emphasize the non-conceptual way of understanding. Maybe we emphasize it because it is not emphasized enough in the other traditions, because we put so much emphasis on meditation practice itself. But it's, like I said, it's like an onion. It has different layers. So there's another kind of way we can understand this five, or the Dharma in general. We can say that it starts on the outside, meaning we are listening to it, we are hearing it. So it's something on the outside in the world to start. And then by putting it into practice, we are cultivating something. So we are beginning to cultivate something on the inside of our mind. So it starts by listening, by thinking about it, by remembering it, and then gradually we begin to cultivate something. And we are bringing something that comes from the outside, we are bringing it in until it becomes something that arises on the inside of your mind. So this kind of three ways to which you begin to embody the teachings. Maybe it starts on the outside, but it really lives. It grows on the inside. And that is really when you're beginning to appreciate what Dharma is, when it starts to grow and takes hold within your own mind. And that's when it becomes true. This is the quality experienced directly by the wise. So it's something that's experiential. It's something we experience. Okay, so this is not the first time that I'm talking about these five qualities. This is a very fundamental to what we are doing, and it can give us confidence in what we are practicing. And like I said, this is a foundational teachings so we can build strong foundations. Then whatever else we have to do, it's easier to do. There's another way to look at it in terms of these 5 qualities. So we can see Dharma as a teachings here. This is something that's proclaimed by the Buddha. And then we can also see it as a path. It is something that we practice. And then ultimately, we also see it as a fruit, as something that's realized, something that is the culmination of our practice. So we can see these 3 aspects here as a teaching, as something we cultivate, as the path, and then ultimately as the fruit of that path. Okay, so now I want to say something just a little bit more kind of Zen-y, more to do with, very briefly, to do with meditation practice itself. In the olden days, there were 40 subjects that were given for meditation practice, and they're listed in the sutras. For example, one of the most basic ones that we still use today is breath. Breath was considered the most universal one. I think it's still it's very good for a number of reasons, but it's very appropriate for meditation practice because it is non-conceptual. And there were other objects, and the most basic ones are the objects of the triple refuge, the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. And then we have breath, we have the body. Sensations in the body can be used as an object of meditation. Then we have 4 immeasurables, for example, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity. These are all various objects of meditation that were given to people, and they're all slightly different. And here I want to talk about Dharma as an object of meditation because it was one of those subject matters. And I think this is the overlap between koan Zen and what I'm talking about today, because in essence, if we are to classify the practice of koans today, it would fall under that category as a Dharma, as an object of meditation, because that's what we are doing when we are taking up a koan. We are taking up a saying of a Zen ancestor, a sayings and doings of Zen ancestors, and we are using those as an object of meditation. So here, the Dharma is not approached conceptually, but it is approached in a very different way, in the same way that you would approach breath or sensations in your body. You would not approach your breath conceptually. So in the same way, we are approaching Dharma. So for example, these 5 characteristics that I have given: visible here and now, immediately effective, inviting inspection, leading towards awakening, experienced directly by the wise. This becomes in itself like a koan. It becomes an object of meditation. What is really the essence of that, and how can we embody the essence of that? It is like this onion that has many layers, and maybe only the most outer layer is the conceptual one. Anything further in is really more of a domain of the wisdom. So this is how it relates to the practice that we're doing today in terms of koan practice, more advanced practices. And I would just, I'm ready to conclude now, and I would just like to say one other thing in terms of what Dharma is. Another definition of the Dharma that's repeated frequently in the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha is that it is something that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good at the end. Meaning no matter where we are along the path, whether we are just starting out or whether we are veterans of the practice or whether we are at the very end of the path, the very same teachings are appropriate. It's not something that changes depending where you're on the path. For example, these 5 qualities that I mentioned are equally applicable to the beginner, to the veteran of practice, and to somebody who's at the end, even though we may understand things at a different level and a deeper level, but those qualities don't change. The fact that it's visible right here now, the fact that it's immediately affected, the fact that it invites us to understand, and so on. So this is another quality of the Dharma. This is something that we can really appreciate. It's something that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good at the end. So this is my presentation for today. It is, again, I want to go back to what is my primary motivation for giving this kind of teaching. It is to bring, so we can bring very strong foundations in Zen practice. And then when we engage with the koans or work with Mu or anything like that, it becomes much easier and simpler because we are rooted, our practice is rooted in authentic Buddha Dharma, and then anything else is really much simpler and easier to deal with. So this is my presentation for you today. We will recite the 4 great vows. Now it's wonderful, just to conclude, it's wonderful to see you here today after we had a little break. I hope you had a nice break, and I hope you're very happy. I'm very happy to be sitting together again. And I know that we will have a wonderful day practicing together. It's in these days and times where we are in isolation due to the pandemic. Zoom is the best that we can do. But nevertheless, I think I'm really grateful for this opportunity for us to be together and to sit together and spend some time in meditation together. Yeah, we will conclude here and we will recite the 4 great vows.